Hey, this is Ariel, and you're listening to the Cyber PR Music Podcast, Dispatches for the New Music Business. Hello, Ariel here. And on today's episode of the Cyber PR Music Podcast, I am going to try to not make it seem like you're listening in on two people that have known each other for a very, very, very long time and have a lot of inside jokes. This is Emily White. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me.
So a little bit of background. I've known Emily for over 10 years now, and she's going to tell us about her background, not me. But she is, in my opinion, one of the smartest minds in music management and new music business today. I have had the pleasure of traveling the world with her and presenting in all kinds of places, from mountaintops in bizarre locations to Meet-Em to South by Southwest. And I'm so excited that you are joining us.
Thank you. And I've known of you and been a fan of yours for like 15 years since I was an intern. So it even goes further back to Boston days, but you didn't know me then.
Emily has a new book out. It's called, well, actually, it's coming out January 2020, but it's available for pre-order now. It's called How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams, which there's very few people, I think, that are capable of writing a book with such a lofty title. And I'm so excited that you are doing this.
Thank you.
I'd love to dive in first. If you could give everyone a little bit of your background and how you got to who you are today.
Yeah, for sure. I promise this won't be as long as it's going to sound like it is, but I'm a kid from Heartland, Wisconsin, which is a village where there's no music industry. Since then, as you said, I've traveled the world. My name has been on the cover of Billboard, and I've just had the privilege of having this extraordinary career. So I've been running management and consulting firms for the past decade. I'm currently a partner at Collective Entertainment here in New York City, where we work with musicians and athletes. I also have a nonprofit called #IVoted, where we activated over 150 venues to let fans in on Election Day 2018 for the midterms. We let fans in who showed a selfie from outside their polling place. So obviously the goal is voter turnout. All these amazing national acts played, and we're already gearing up for 2020. So I think that's it. That's what I do.
Okay. And I want to hear a little bit, I'd love for you to just shed a little bit of light about your Dresden Dolls days, just because I think that that's a very important part of. I worked at a tiny record label called What Are Records, which I would refer to that as my Dresden Dolls days. And Emily and I have this in common, where we were on teams with incredibly effective artists that were doing truly groundbreaking things at the time. And I think that's why we're such kindred spirits. It set us up for really understanding how the music industry works effectively. And I'd love for you to just take us through like what that experience was about.
Yeah, absolutely. So a boyfriend of mine in college first told me about the Dresden Dolls and was like, "You, Emily, like I know what kind of music you will like. You will love this band." And I saw them play at the Boston Music Awards. Maybe you were there at the Wang. They did 2 songs. It was beautiful. And then I went to their amazing sold out album release show at the Paradise. And they had no team in place at that time. I mean, that was the definition of DIY. And then they played at my university. They played at Northeastern, where I think they still have a non-alcoholic all ages club called After Hours that pays musicians really well. So they get good talent. So the Dresden Dolls played at After Hours. I was buying CDs at the time for my friends at home in Wisconsin, and was very nervous to introduce myself to the band, which is a duo, Amanda Palmer and Brian Viglione. But I presented myself professionally, I guess. Well, I know in hindsight, as opposed to just being like a fan person. I was a fan, but anyway, I said, I'm studying music business. I write for Scope Magazine. I intern at WBCN. Let me know if you ever need help with anything. And Amanda was like, can you come over tomorrow? So I did. And the Dresden Dolls were a local band on the rise. They definitely were buzzing locally, but they certainly were a local band. And yeah, showed up at Amanda's amazing apartment, which was called the Cloud Club, which was really an artist commune of just these incredible collaborators. And maybe we take some of these roles for granted now, but this was 2003 or something. And so she had in-house web designers. Michael Pope lived there, who did directed her their music videos. Zaya Barker was there, who did all the costume design. And again, to have webmasters in your home in 2003, like bands did not have websites. So it was really this extraordinary world that I quickly became a part of, and ended up tour managing the band, really grew up with them professionally. And we went from there. I mean, the day I graduated from college, I didn't walk. I graduated, but I did not walk because we were at Coachella starting a 3-continent tour with 9 Inch Nails. But to your point, almost everything that you and I, all the knowledge we share with people, a lot of it is rooted in that. Like one of the first things I had to do for Amanda as an intern was help with their email list. And again, this was 2003, 2004. Nobody was, I don't know, were there conferences then? I guess there were, but nobody was talking about, email collection and data and things like that. And I would say this in front of Amanda, like that came out of paranoia for her. I think maybe they did have Walter as their attorney at the time, and maybe Wes at JSR was doing merch, and maybe they had an agent. But this stands out in my brain where she was like, what if you go away? What if my fancy attorney goes away? What if my booking agent goes away? This is the only way I have to communicate our music and shows to people. And it just started with like, a BCC list or whatever. And you could barely, in the early days and probably even now, you could barely say hi to Amanda and Brian or myself without us saying, would you like to sign up for the email list?
Yes.
And when I started managing Amanda solo years later, her first solo album was produced by Ben Folds. And I went to grab the Dolls email list, which it surprised me at the time. I think it had 50,000 email addresses. So all those, will you sign up for our email address? It's probably over 100,000 now, had added up. And in the first week that album was released, which was on a major label subsidiary, it sold 10,000 copies. We sold 9,000 through the email list, which also had bundles. And so Amanda made 6 figures in a week. And 1,000 was sold by the label. Which was very confusing to me because their one job was to sell downloads on iTunes and CDs and stuff like that. So 90% of our sales came through our email list. And I use Amanda's email list as an example for students. That works for her, right? I think the most important thing is it comes from her. It's she puts a lot of heart and thought into the message. It's very long. Her fans like that. And then, as I mentioned on a panel you and I were just on, my friend Dan Dazinski's project, Any Kind, just launched a great email list strategy, and his is a little more like simple. I mean, clean by like design, kind of like Apple aesthetic, and that works for him and his art. So, so that's my background with the Dresden Dolls. Very, very, very grateful to have had those experiences and to have those people as friends.
I love it that the woman who wrote the book, The Art of Asking, literally the first thing she did with you was ask you to come over to her house the next day. So that was, clearly, I also wrote about Amanda in, I think, all of my books. But when I wrote about her in CrowdStart, I wrote that, that fear of asking is so huge for so many artists. They don't even know what to ask, A, and then B, this sort of like, we have to suffer for our art. We can't make any money. We shouldn't, asking is about selling. And that's what she so incredibly does. I would love to hear about how to build a sustainable music career. But before we do that, you and I in the pre-call talked a lot about the most frequent questions that you get asked. So when artists come to you, and I know you're teaching at the Clive Davis School at NYU, what students are asking you, what do you get? What's happening out there for you? And when people try to get you on the phone or hit you up on email or contact you on social media, what seems to be the biggest concern?
I mean, I don't know about concern. I think concern is more like, I want to be bigger. And then I'm like, well, define that, let's be specific. And the grass is always greener. It's even worse in the age of Instagram. But I do think the number one question I get at conferences and from students is how to get a manager. And that's actually chapter 12 of my new book is when do I need an attorney, business manager, and or manager. It's not chapter 1 because this is what I said to the students, like, if you want to get signed, you have to listen to everything I'm saying. If you get signed, you have to listen to everything I'm saying. And if you don't care about getting signed, you have to listen to everything I'm saying. Management relationships, in my experience, happen very organically. It comes from really immersing yourself in the scene, both the artist and the manager. And Julia Nunes is a great example. That's really the only artist I actively work on right now. I met Julia in 2013 at Meet M, and I didn't start managing her until last year. It was her speaking agent that really kind of pushed us together, and we had quite a few conversations before it finally happened. We get emails every day asking us to manage them, and I'm sure some people have gotten managers that way, but again, I think it's more organic. And I happen to just be grading papers and final exams for the Clive Davis students. And I was very pleased to see one response that was like, the students seemed to be blown away that there were no qualifications to be a manager, as opposed to like a licensed agent or an attorney. And so one said like, and I also taught them what a sycophant is. So that's like different. But one student was like, I really want to be a manager and I care about my artist friends so much and they're really talented. And you showed me that can work in the professional sense because I'm not a sycophant, he said. So yeah, I think it's what I was saying to you in the pre-call is every artist I've ever met, which this is not their fault, it's just the truth, grows up with an idea or a stereotype in their head of what their manager is going to be like. So it's going to be John Landau or Paul McGuinness or Brian Epstein, and we're going to be these amazing miracle workers and just snap our fingers and things will happen overnight. I view artist management as a partnership. So we can never live up to that stereotype. And I mentioned my business partner has a rule that we call the Melissa rule. When we are, and we rarely take on artists because it is so intimate, hands-on, full on. It's a very, I don't want to say 24/7, but it's literally a 360 relationship. So the Melissa rule is, she asks them if they've had management before. And if the answer is no, that is often concerning because we can never live up to that idea in their head. But if the answer is yes, we have a lot of confidence in what we do. And it also gives them a framework of expectations. And what that means is like, you have to get back to us, like the more time we're spending chasing, the less time I have to move your career forward. And I don't want to care more about your career than you do. So I just think, yeah, that's the question I get a lot. But again, it's chapter 12 in the book because you need to, what if I die? I don't mean to be dramatic, but you know what I mean? It's like, what happens if the manager goes away? You need to have your data in place and you need to have your revenue streams in place.
Back to the Amanda Palmer concern of like, what if everything goes away? I need to have my data.
That's right.
Okay. So what's chapter 1?
Chapter 1, and I'm so pleased. Again, I'm sorry, not sorry that I'm in grading mode, that I saw a great comment from a student saying, he quoted chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Get Your Art Together. And so he wrote to me in caps, like, get your art together. That's going to stay with me forever. And that's where it all starts, right? So how many people come up to you and I at conferences in like demo listening sessions or whatever, and are like, well, I need to work on my vocals, or I need a new drummer, or I need this, or it's like, well, then do that. And I understand that they're excited to share it with an industry person or whatever, but you have to make great art or this, or none of the other chapters work, and you're not going to get a manager and all those things. So that's chapter 1, get your art together.
Okay. Amazing. So once your art is together, before you get a manager, the 11 chapters in between, I would love to talk about, I find a lot of artists that we work with, they come to us because our company is called Cyber PR. The bait and switch that I put onto them is that we don't really do PR anymore. And a lot of you who know me know all the reasons why. But just to recap, for those of you who may be new, PR doesn't do what most artists think that it should do. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I started, PR was a different beast. The world didn't have social media, so you couldn't really build your own PR story. You really did have to rely on the media, and it was hard to get to them. You did need someone who understood how to communicate with them. And that still is true today. If you are looking to get high profile, like Good Morning America or a massive editorial piece in Vanity Fair, you're probably not going to get that by hitting someone up on Twitter. You might, but you probably won't. And so there is a lot of bad information that's out there about, hiring a radio promoter. There's been a lot of articles recently about how payola is still alive and well, and that's really not a thing. Or hire a publicist, or Emily and I were also saying we're seeing a lot of people hire these sort of shady Spotify playlisting companies that are not doing organic work, real playlists. They're doing, sort of faking the numbers. Where are you seeing artists making mistakes?
Yeah, so those are all such great points, because chapter 2 is called Pre-Recording Marketing Foundation, Email List, and Social Media. And that's very much what you do now at Cyber PR, right? That's very much like the Ariel chapter. I'm quite sure you're in it. And what I'm saying there is like, okay, get your foundation in place, get your email list in place, your text club. Most people have their social media set up, but you don't want to be messing with that, once the record is out. Just have it ready to go. But what you were talking about, traditional PR, that's actually chapter 7, or in chapter 7, which is called How to Market with or Without a Budget. And there's a reason why it's so much later, because it's exactly what you're describing. There isn't really a direct return on investment, and it's just a totally different ballgame. So I forgot your initial question, but I was very fascinated by that.
Yeah. The initial question is, where are artists making mistakes? And I think we both just said it. I think 10 years ago, the advice, if you were lucky enough to have a consultation with a label person, or you could get a big manager, or you want to sit down and talk to even a music attorney, a lot of the advice that they would give was get a publicist.
Right.
Because back in the day, that was definitely one way of gaining an entree, as it were. And now that is like so not what you should do. So I think what Emily is saying, and social media, I think we all have it. We're all using it. I don't think we're all using it well or right, but that's okay. That's a learnable skill. The part about your email list, your text message list, I find artists are still so resistant to these two things. They don't want to do it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to learn MailChimp. It's annoying. I don't know what. I think part of it is also they feel like they hate being on other artists' email lists, and so they get a bit judgmental. Remember, your email list is probably not full of a lot of other artists. It's full of fans. And so you might get annoyed when you see other musicians' email lists because you don't like the way they're communicating. But that is not a reason not to have an email list. But yeah, your points about having and controlling the data, I think it's so key and crucial. And I mean, again, if as you work with artists, especially the newer and more emerging ones, what's your best advice as far as first steps to take in the sort of data world? What is there to understand?
Yeah, I think with that, just be cognizant of it, right? So when everybody's focusing on Spotify streams, have a Bandcamp strategy, like have a strategy through your website. Like, how are you collecting phone numbers and email addresses? Because you and I have said it countless times. If you're driving people to Spotify, if you're driving people to Apple Music, you're just driving that fan data to Apple and to Spotify and to these massive tech companies. And I'm not saying don't do that, but do your direct to fan component first and make it very clear to your audience, like, the best way you can help me is checking out these awesome bundles on the website. If that sounds like torture to you, it's totally worth it to give up a 15% commission to Bandcamp, because they will share that data and information. The best way I can explain this is, if you built your career on MySpace, it doesn't exist anymore. And I used to say for years, like, I know it feels crazy that Facebook might not exist or people might evolve away from it, but there's a good chance it could be broken up by the government. And there's a good chance that people are sick of the privacy scandals and everybody's just going to move on, right? So it goes back to that Amanda paranoia that was actually really brilliant. This is what you own and control: email address, phone number, and I know there's some ambiguity here, but trying to know where those fans are as well.
Let's dive into that. I think that's really, really interesting, and something that artists do overlook quite a bit is, where are your fans? And we were joking about back in the day when digital was in its baby place, there was this amazing app called Demand It. And speakers used it, authors used it, very few musicians were using it, but it was this wonderful little tool where if I wanted someone that I was a fan of and I went to their website, there'd be a Demand It button, and I would just press the button and it would tell the artist or the author, whoever, that I wanted them to play in my hometown. Bands in Town has just rolled out a Play My City button. So I finally am seeing something like this back in the marketplace, which I think is exciting. But take us through, how can an artist become aware of, what should they become aware of as far as location of fans?
Yeah, I just think it's got to drive touring. And I'd love to be wrong about this, but I don't hear that a lot from agents or agencies. It just feels like, okay, we're going to book you at Shuba's in Chicago and Bottom of the Hill in San Francisco. And it just seems like kind of the same old thing. And I've really had some incredible experiences routing tours and figuring out where artists should play from Facebook Insights and location data that we can find on social media. Now, you made the excellent point. If you have bloated your followers in an ethical way or not, that's going to be a nightmare. I did manage a band that was on a major label and definitely had that issue. I would say in that instance, I know this is a little bit more work, but you're really going to want to see if you can also get, zip code, postcode for email list and text club. Text club, you can figure it out a little bit with area codes, but obviously people move and things like that. But if you haven't done a lot of kind of bloating of your followers, and it is pretty authentic, one of my favorite examples is Imogen Heap's longtime manager noticed that Jakarta was the #1 country for Imogen on Facebook, and that's obviously a city. So this city was outperforming other countries. And he said to the agent, like, can you see what's going on in Indonesia? And the agent's like, there's no music industry there. Like, don't bother. And he's like, can you just check? And came back with like a whole bunch of 6-figure offers. None of that would have, Imogen and her manager wouldn't have known that without the location data from social media. And I did the same thing with Brennan Benson. Historically, he does really well in London. He lives in Nashville, does great in New York. But Sao Paulo was blowing up for us. So we did the same thing. We had the agent reach out to promoters in Brazil. And they're like, we've been dying to get Brendan down here. And that was one of the coolest tours I've ever been on. Just like literally signs from fans like, we've been waiting for you. So that information is there, and utilize it instead of just playing the same old like 12 clubs that everybody does in the United States.
So just to clarify what Emily said, because she said it in a much nicer way than I would say it, for those of you who have purchased shady likes, like I'll get 3,000 likes for $150 on Facebook or Twitter or any of those, Instagram, you have muddied your data waters. So especially on Facebook, if you have done the cheap likes, like I could get a like for 10 cents versus a like for $1.50. And if you've worked with companies that have helped you to get likes, this is a huge problem. I once had a band come to me. They had 350,000 followers. They were from San Francisco and they had barely played out. And I looked at their Facebook insights and they were massive in the Philippines and in India. And I was like, okay, what are you touring there? And they're like, no, that's just where our fans are. And I wanted to just say, well, actually, no, that's where the bot farms are. So you can muddy the waters very quickly, which is why it is a terrible idea to purchase this kind of packaged 3,000 likes. I think most of us know that, but I did just want to throw that in. There's another sort of second level of bad, which is, and this is really hard. I know that as we're trying to get ahead and build fans, we are told by all kinds of people, promoters and people in the industry, like, well, you just don't have enough fans on your Facebook page or whatever page. So of course we go and we buy Facebook ads, Instagram ads, even Twitter ads. These are also not going to be real fans. Someone might see an ad, they might like your tank top, they might like your dog, they might like a post that you made about, something that's somewhat irrelevant to your music career. They might not even understand that you're a musician and they liked your page as a result of an ad. So again, when Emily is talking about where your fans are, you have to truly understand that they have to be real fans. They can't be fans that were purchased in some sort of ego boosting click campaign.
And that's all it is, because it's actually a disaster to do that. So I hear this on panels a lot. I'm sure you do too. Like, well, how many followers? I was on a panel with like major label people, and the questions were like, well, how many followers are you looking for? I'm like, we're looking for great art, and we're looking for engagement on your social pages. It's a balance. Like if you have a bunch of followers and your music sucks, no one cares. And then I'll be open about this band because I think they would be fine with it. And it was just as frustrating for them. I managed the band Hockey, who had a bidding war and, major labels interested. I'm the one that gets called in when that all falls apart. And it's like, oh, Emily, bring in Emily to come clean it up. And so they had 100,000, 200,000 Facebook likes. And we did a co-headlining tour with another band that I managed actually. And all the agents seemed to think it was a good idea. I thought it was a good idea, but those likes were really bloated by the label and lots of ad spends and things like that. And Hockey did not draw, the equivalent of what the co-headliner drew. And that was awkward between the artists. It was hard for me as managing both artists. So it doesn't really get you anywhere. It's actually going to bite you in the, can I say ass?
Yes, you can.
Okay. It's going to bite you in the ass and at the end of the day.
Yeah. That is sad but true. So do resist if that's sort of something that's frustrating you. It is really hard to get an authentic like, especially now that social media has saturated everything. We're working for a major music tech company right now. I mean, major, like they have millions of people on their email list, and we just started their social accounts, and it's painful. We're at 300 on Twitter. We're at 500 on Facebook. I'm personally inviting friends that I know. It's hard, but the thing that I love about working with this company is they're not mad that they're not in the tens of thousands in the first weeks of working together, because they understand a like on Facebook, if someone is going to take the time and energy and effort, or a follow on Twitter or an email sign up, it's going to be a real fan who's really interested. So that's the good news. And I actually view those numbers as pretty good. Like maybe just because I do this and know this world, it's like, I think that's great, because I think it's when it's like 30 that like on Facebook or something, that's not good. But if I'm seeing something like that, it feels authentic to me. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. And it's a build again. It's a build, and it's always interesting. I hate getting the call from people that are like, well, we took a meeting at a major label and they said until we have 1 million followers, we shouldn't even call them. And how do we get that? We need to get that really fast. And that's when you can end up just totally destroying any chance of an organic build.
Also, why do you want to be on a major label would be my question. But
well,
I was so pleased, I have to say. So I had my students submit who their dream guest speaker was and vote on it instead of me just bringing like my people in, because I feel like they were going to have access to my people anyway. And the winner was Freddie Gibbs' manager named Lambo, who really exemplified everything we did not do a pre-interview. And he exemplified everything you and I talk about. And basically, Interscope spent $500,000 on Freddie making an album, never put it out. Also, Lambo signed him to Interscope as an unpaid intern. And then so Lambo just became his manager. They built it up over the past 10 years, and now they license their releases to a major label. That's the position you want to be in.
Right. Amazing. So time has flown. We've got a couple more minutes, and I do want to touch on the last sort of major data collection point that you have mentioned, but we haven't taken a dive into, and that is text clubs. How do we do it? What do we do? Where do we go? How do we start? What the hell is a text club, Em?
It's pretty straightforward. And again, like we kind of touched on people getting oversaturated with email. And I can compare it to voting very quickly. I know that voter turnout groups have much more effective results when they text message, like here's where your poll is and things like that, instead of people just organizing or ignoring an email. It's something we tried to do with Amanda like 10 years ago. We used to hold up like a cardboard or whatever poster board sign on stage with a Google Voice number that went to an actual human and had to add these things. I've had a lot of success with it recently with a pro sports team I'm managing. Shout out DC Trident. We just put up a text club. We examined a few platforms. We've been using Textedly. That worked for our budget. It was seamless to use. We liked it. And we just said, hey, join the DC Trident Text Club. And all these people gave us their phone numbers. And then meanwhile, while we were talking to a pretty major apparel brand who started dragging their feet, every time a fan was like, how can I get your gear? How can I empty my pockets? I want to buy your stuff. I'm like, great, sign up for the DC Trident Text Club or email list, because then I can communicate with them directly. In music world, Zoe Keating crushes it at this. She's actually doing the billboard, the poster board equivalent thing, because for her, and even though like be like Zoe, don't be like this thing I'm about to say. With email list stuff, you have to upload it into MailChimp or FanBridge or whatever you're using. Zoe realized like, I keep forgetting to do that. So she just puts a poster board out at all of her shows. That's the text club. She definitely still utilizes her email list. That's a huge, I interviewed her for the forward of my book, and because she's the only artist I've ever met that doesn't need to read the book. But she said putting the poster board at the merch table with the text club has been really effective for her.
And is she also using Textedly?
I am not sure.
Okay. I'd love to. I'll put all of these links in the show notes, of course, so you guys can all check out what is working, and we can see what Zoe Keating is using. Is probably somewhere on her website. And any best practices for how to use text clubs? Like how often should you be texting? Any tips there?
Yeah, I think like anything, you want to be mindful, of people's inboxes, but at the same time, like it's custom to you, right? So I would say like twice a month max, and make sure you have something to say. So a student in class, and I feel bad, I can't remember the artist, told me about an artist with a text club that texts like constantly, and his fans love it, right? And that works for him. I mean, I'm not saying that works for everyone,
right?
But you have to figure out what works for you.
Right. In my last podcast, I interviewed Manifest, and he's an artist who he literally communicates with his email list almost every day.
Wow.
And they love it. And again, that works for him. That probably doesn't work for everyone. So it is about sort of finding your lane, and deciding, also how old are the people, how often are they using their phones? Or these are all things to take into consideration. Any parting words as we wrap up?
I really am not trying to sell books. I just hope what I have to say is helpful, because I hesitated on writing this book for a long time, but I got sick of explaining it to people. And I just felt like you shouldn't have to know me personally to have access to it. So I hope it's helpful. It seems like it's been really helpful for my students. My talks have been like, I say this out of like, I'm really proud of the material. It's like, there's as many people coming to see me at a conference with the book's title as the title of my talk as they are coming to see Kevin Lyman, and that's insane. So I'm excited to see what you guys do with this information, and just keep it, because it's a step-by-step guide, right? Instead of just grasping at nuggets of information about an industry that was set up decades ago to confuse artists.
So the book is called How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams. Where can they get it?
I'm going to send you the link to the pre-order, and then it'll be up on Amazon and all those things in January. But right now it's available for pre-order, and my pre-order peeps will be getting their copy in the next few weeks.
Emily White, thank you so much for being here with me. Always a delight to have you around me.
My pleasure, lady.
This episode of the Cyber PR Music Podcast is brought to you by our dear friend Karen Allen, creator of Twitch for Musicians. In this online course, you will learn how to create meaningful relationships with fans and make money directly from your audience members, both new and old. Learn everything you need to know about live streaming on Twitch from the master herself, and get 30% off today by visiting the link in our show notes.